Hello viewers, I'm your host Uzma Jafri with another episode of South Asia Focus. Let's begin the show. Public anger has spiraled into massive demonstrations in Sri Lanka as large crowds protested against the ruling dispensation of the country this week. People demanded the government's ouster as they levelled charges of ruining the country against Rajapaksas. The island nation has been struggling to contain the crisis that erupted in the wake of Forex reserve depletion in the country. The residents have taken to streets as they say they are reeling due to the shortages of fuel, gas, food and even staples. And this has given rise to unprecedented inflation. Shouting slogans demanding the government to resign. A number of groups held several protests in capital Colombo against the crisis they said they were enduring owing to government's incompetence. The Sri Lankan Forex shortage that has plunged into a situation of crisis in the past few weeks has triggered unrest and chaos across the country. People are out on the streets expressing anger that the government tried to muzzle last week through imposition of emergency but lifted following both domestic and external condemnation. There are shortages of fuel and food. Prolonged power cuts have further crippled country's economy and people's everyday lives. The prices of fruits and vegetables have skyrocketed to more than double over the past few weeks, making the essential items out of reach for a commoner's plate.
The reason why we have to hit the road is there was a failure from the government eternally putting the pressure on the innocent people. Number one, we have been criticized our daily routine, which is the prices hikes of every commodity. So we cannot bear it up. There is a average that ordinary person bear it up. Persons like us, it's in the economical status where we cannot bear it up. So everybody who comes to the street having a reason. The reason behind was the major crisis was improper management of finance and economy.
Over the past decade, the Sri Lankan government has borrowed vast sums of money from foreign lenders to fund public services. This borrowing spree has coincided with a series of hammer blows to the Sri Lankan economy from both natural disasters such as heavy monsoons to man-made catastrophes, including a government ban on chemical fertilizers that decimated farmers' harvests. Sri Lanka then had to fall back on its foreign exchange reserves to pay off government debt, shrinking its reserves from $6.9 billion in 2018 to a little over $2.3 billion this year. The country has to repay about $4 billion in debt over the rest of this year, including a $1 billion international sovereign bond that matures in July.
මිනිස්සුන්ට සල්ලි නැහැ කොච්චර අපි හොයාගත්තත් පියදමට මාදි ගෙදර ඉතුරු කරන්න තියා අවුරුදු වෙනවා අත ළඟ අවුරුද්දට ළමයෙක්ට ඇඳුමක් හරි අරන් දෙන්න වත්කම නැහැ කොච්චර ඒවත් වැඩකුත් නැහැ විශ්වසුත් නැහැ ඒකයි ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය ගැන කියන්න තියෙන්නේ.
Meanwhile, India, the island nation's neighbor, which it has been looking up for help, has stepped up its efforts in order to rescue the country from the crisis. Last week, a consignment of 40,000 metric ton of diesel under Indian assistance through a line of credit of $500 million was handed over to Sri Lankan government. Earlier, India had also supplied 6,000 metric ton of fuel to the Ceylon Electricity Board. After providing Sri Lanka with a short-term credit line of $500 million earlier this year, New Delhi has committed to provide an additional $1 billion line of credit to Colombo. Meanwhile, the government has appointed a 3-member team with international experience to help curb the crisis and engage with the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. It says it is hopeful of an early solution. The Rajapaksa administration had assured the citizens of resolving the crisis in a few days last month. But the protracted issue is not seemingly getting over just as of now.
Moving on. Indo-Nepal relationship seems to have received a fresh impetus with Himalayan nation's Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba visiting India for 3 days last week. Entire gamut of ties was reviewed. The two sides also acknowledged and kicked off the jointly accomplished infrastructural projects. A joint statement was released that underlined both sides' commitment to resolve any form of hiccups and apprehensions through dialogue. PM Deuba also paid a visit to India's spiritual capital Varanasi, which emphasized the centuries-old cultural ties between the two. Experts have called it a productive engagement. One of my colleagues, Binod Prasad Adhikari, spoke to a Kathmandu-based senior journalist, Koshraj Koirala, to understand the developments better. Have a look.
South Asian region is going through unprecedented times, with countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka undergoing different forms of political crisis. In such a time, how do you see the recent visit of Nepali Prime Minister Sher Bahadur Deuba to India?
Well, you're right. South Asian countries are, like Pakistan and Sri Lanka in particular, they are, going through very different kinds of political situation. We just saw like Pakistani Prime Minister dissolve parliament, and Sri Lankan, politics is also undergoing the same kind of problem. So the visit of Prime Minister Deuba at this point of time, I think, it has, helped to restore the cordial relations that, that exist between the two people. We are culturally, religiously, or, we are connected with each other through different linkages. I think the visit was very important to restore the cordial relation, between Nepal and India.
How do you look at the future of the ties between the two countries? Where are they headed as of now, according to you?
Prime Minister Deuba visited India. He just met, Prime Minister Modi, his Indian counterpart, and other ministers. I think, this has tried to reaffirm the close relationship that exists between Nepal and India. For example, Prime Minister Deuba also visited Varanasi, the way where famous Nepali temple is also located. So that kind of shows that we have religious linkages. That visit tries to restore that point. And also, although there was no like joint statement issued after the visit, but then there are certain agreements that have been reached between Nepal and India. For example, this vision paper on power sector cooperation between these two countries. And this, I would say, this is a landmark agreement between Nepal and India. Even in political circle, there is a realization that we need to have closer cooperation with India. And it is only with the help of this closer cooperation in economic front that can help Nepal to achieve prosperity. We have slogans like prosperous Nepal, happy Nepali. But there is a realization that this is possible only when we have very good relations with India and when we just enhance our economic cooperation with India.
Different prime ministers have seemingly pursued a different India policy in the past few years. What, according to you, is the correct policy, keeping in view the kind of development Nepal is looking at owing to joint efforts?
Prime Minister Deuba, since he is the Prime Minister of Nepali Congress, Nepali Congress views India differently as compared to other left political parties in Nepal. So Prime Minister Deuba, naturally, or Nepali Congress, I would say, they naturally want to seek, closer ties with India all the time. And earlier we had like very close relation at the political level, but then not much had happened in the economic front. This is time that we start enhancing our economic cooperation. That only helps, like, people will realize, when people are able to just, realize the benefit of economic cooperation with India, then I think our relation will, between these two countries, we are now linked with, we call roti-beti relations. I think this has to, many people in Nepal, they say that it should not be limited to roti-beti only. Now I think electricity also has to be included there, because that is the only, one of the biggest potential that we have, and in which we can actually enhance our cooperation.
Moving on. As Russian invasion of Ukraine enters 7th week and there appears no light of peace at the end of the tunnel, the international community is finding it hard to put together a tangible solution to bring the fight to an end. The UN, US and the EU have doubled down their efforts to further isolate Russia, but this has prompted only one thing: escalation. Meanwhile, New Delhi, which has sent humanitarian assistance for the affected regions in the past, has unequivocally condemned the horrific images that have emerged from the Ukrainian town of Bucha. Since day one, India has held its position that it wants peace and have urged both sides to use diplomatic means to resolve the crisis.
Pictures that shook the conscience of people around the world surfaced from Ukrainian capital Kyiv suburb Bucha this week. Corpses lying on roadsides, infrastructure turned into rubble, and the destroyed heavy war machinery. This appears to be the tipping point. An attack that is largely being called as genocide marked the darkest day in the Russia-Ukraine conflict that has entered its 7th week. The West has leveled charges of Russia targeting the civilians, which Moscow has clearly denied. Meanwhile, Indian Foreign Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar strongly condemned what transpired in Bucha and urged for an independent investigation into the issue. While explaining New Delhi's position on the conflict, Jaishankar said that it had chosen the side of peace.
We are deeply disturbed by the reports. We strongly condemn the killings which have taken place there. This is an extremely serious matter, and we support the call for an independent investigation.
Meanwhile, the United Nations General Assembly suspended Russia from the UN Human Rights Council, citing gross and systematic violations and abuses of human rights by invading Russian troops in Ukraine. The US-led push garnered 93 votes in favor, while 24 countries voted no and 58 countries abstained. A two-thirds majority of voting members in the 193-member General Assembly in New York, abstentions do not count, was needed to suspend Russia from the 47-member Geneva-based Human Rights Council. Speaking after the vote, Russia described the move as an illegitimate and politically motivated step and declared it decided to leave the council altogether. New Delhi has so far abstained from most of the resolutions that have been brought against Russia. It has clearly indicated through its position that it will condemn all forms of violence but will not be coerced into giving up its diplomatic interests.
We believe that no solution can be arrived at by shedding blood and at the cost of innocent lives. In this day and age, dialogue and diplomacy are the right answers to any disputes, and this should bear in mind that the contemporary global order has been built on the UN Charter, on respect for international law, and for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. If India has chosen a side, it is the side of peace.
Last month, the US President Joe Biden had called Indian move shaky after it didn't fall in line with what apparently looked like Washington's instruction against Russia. While the other Quad countries, the United States, Japan and Australia, have sanctioned Russian entities or people, India has not imposed sanctions on its biggest supplier of military hardware. India has time and again said it will never support war. Indian history and present corroborates its position, but has also given clear message to the world that it cannot be cowed down into taking a position against its interests.
Time now for Asia This Week, the stories from across the continent.
Basra residents strolled between flower beds, roses and gardens at Basra's 5th flower exhibition, a flower and plant show that aims to encourage citizens to green their gardens. Enough with concrete cities that are full of stone, streets and asphalt, a retired teacher, Hassan Al-Dihar, said, adding that he was hoping local authorities would increase their efforts in planting trees in the city. Climate change, wars and the oil industry are factors that contributed to desertification in Basra, a province once known for its gardens, orchards and palm groves. Flowers and plants exhibited included varieties that survived dry weather, and more than 30 companies participated in the event. The exhibition will remain open to the public throughout the month of Ramadan, offering visitors the opportunity to not only admire flowers but also buy them and spend refreshing moments in the grass areas dotting the exhibition grounds. Japan's Yaskawa company has developed an industrial robot with artificial intelligence which determines the color and shape of the objects and transport them to their correct position. Yaskawa company is evolving in various fields, including the automobile industry and parts manufacturing, according with the needs of the era. Yaskawa is promoting the solution concept i3, iCube Mechatronics, to realize a new industrial automation revolution. i3 means Integrated Intelligence Innovative. At the Industrial Robot Expo held in Tokyo this March, a demonstration including Yaskawa's latest technology attracted attention. In the demonstration, robots with different roles work properly. Each robot has artificial intelligence and works independently. The instructor robot gives efficient instructions to each robot about work situation. The robots communicate with each other to work autonomously and more efficiently. Yaskawa Electric's technology has the mission to support global manufacturing industry continuously. This is the roadside station Kisarazu Umakuta no Sato in Kisarazu City, Chiba Prefecture. Inside the store, there is a large peanut statue. Chiba Prefecture produces the largest amount of peanuts in Japan and therefore is a local speciality here. A farm cafe, restaurant and tree is located in the corner of the store. It is a popular restaurant with a menu that uses plenty of local vegetables. In the popular meal menu, especially peanut soft cream is one of the restaurant's most popular one. The peanut soft cream is the original one of these restaurants, created in consultation with the manufacturer Nisse, along with careful attention to the blending ratio so that the flavor of vanilla is not too strong and the peanut aroma is enhanced. The peanut soft cream was created in this way. It has the perfect balance of flavor to attract from small children to adults. This restaurant also sells soft ice cream made with Kisarazu's specialty blueberry. This soft cream provides crunchy feeling which is similar to that of shaved ice. Furthermore, the unique shape of this soft cream is popular among tourists.
Moving on. Various states in India recently welcomed their traditional New Year with festivals like Gudi Padwa and Ugadi. Observed with great joy and enthusiasm, these festivals also celebrate the arrival of spring season.
The month of April is all about celebrating various religious festivals with gusto and fervour. During this time, various states in India celebrate their traditional New Year with different names to mark the beginning of Chaitra month. In Maharashtra, it is observed as Gudi Padwa that leads up to Ram Navami, which is celebrated on the 9th day. The festival is observed with colourful floor decorations called Rangoli, a special Gudi flag, street processions, dancing and festive foods. Also known as Brahma's flag, Gudi is a bright green saffron or yellow cloth tied to the tip of a long bamboo over which sugar crystals, neem leaves, a twig of mango leaves and a garland of red flowers is tied. A silver or copper pot is placed in the inverted position over it. Then this Gudi, which is regarded as a symbol of victory, is hoisted outside the house, especially at a high place, so that everybody can see it.
आज सृष्टि का निर्माण हुआ था जो ब्रह्मा जी ने किया था, उस अवसर पर हम लोग गुड़ी की पूजा करते हैं। और दूसरा जो राम भगवान ने विजय पाई थी, इस वजह से वहाँ पे जब वो गुड़ी लेके मतलब तब से गुड़ी का एक दूसरी बात बोले तो वहाँ से विजय हुआ था, मतलब विजय का एक प्रतीक है गुड़ी। इस अवसर पर हम लोग गुड़ी पड़वा का जो परंपरा है वो तब से चली आ रही है और हम लोग सेलिब्रेट करते हैं।
Swagat Yatra or Shobha Yatra is a big part of Gudi Padwa celebrations and is organized in various parts of the country. The procession that takes place is likely an explosion of colors, blending tradition with modernity. Several people, no matter youngsters or adults, join the yatra and dance to the beat of dhols and tashas. This 2-decade-old tradition marks the celebrations that were done for Lord Ram after his return to Ayodhya after completing 14 years of exile.
आज श्री रामचंद्र जीत कर आए थे, इसकी वजह से आज ये हिंदू नववर्ष दिन गुड़ी पाड़वा के नाम से प्रचलित है और पूरे महाराष्ट्र में तो पूरे हिंदुस्तान में ये श्री राम जी का जो जीत कर आए थे उसकी वजह से सब लोग ये दिन मनाते हैं। ये सारे हिंदुस्तान में अच्छे तरह से रथ बनाए जाते हैं, रैलियाँ बनाई जाती है। सुबह सुबह सब पारंपरिक उनका गणवेश पहन के आते हैं और जोरों शोरों से, बहुत जोरों शोरों से ये दिन, ये जीत का महोत्सव मनाते हैं।
In Andhra Pradesh, the same occasion is observed as Ugadi and in Karnataka as Yugadi, which is assumed to be the first day of creation of earth. On this day, people also visit the nearest temples and offer prayers so that the upcoming year brings good luck and blessings of the Almighty.
As a number of festivals in India are often linked to the sowing and reaping of crops, Gudi Padwa too marks the end of Rabi crop season. With that, we come to the end of this week's episode. See you next week. Goodbye and take care.